Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to episode 7 of In the Box. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm really excited to dive into this. Let's go.
Yeah, we usually film Mondays. We're filming Tuesdays. Thankfully, we waited this one out considering we've had some recent news kind of drop of late. We're just going to get into it. We're going to get into it right now. We're going to start with the New York Rangers because obviously they're on a bit of a skid right now, including last night's game to the St. Louis Blues. And Elliot Friedman dropped a bomb. He decided to drop an absolute bomb when he tweeted out Monday morning that they were looking to shake things up in as well as naming Jacob Trouba and Chris Kreider, surprisingly, as the guys that could be considered to potentially get traded. I'm going to start first because I obviously love to talk about the New York Rangers, especially when they're kind of spiraling. I understand it. People are going to point to the fact that they're safely in a playoff spot, and that is true. But one, the goal of this team is not to safely make the playoffs, it's to contend with the Carolina and Florida Panthers of the NHL. Two, they're 1-6 against playoff teams that are in playoff spots right now. Let me just say that. They beat Toronto, but they've lost to Edmonton, Calgary, which I guess you could say is not going to be a playoff team by the end of the season, but still, then you just straight up shouldn't be losing to them. Florida, Washington, Buffalo, and Winnipeg. Only one of those was by one goal. Three of those were by more than two goals. So yeah, they're beating up on the bad teams, but when they actually play a team with an actual pulse that they might actually eventually have to face in the playoffs outside of Toronto, it's been kind of a shit show. And especially when looking at the guys that were lackluster last season and Zabinajad, Trouba, Lindgren, as well as Kreider was actually pretty good last year. It's just been a disaster. Zabinajad has 15 points in 20 games, only 4 goals. Only 7 of those are at even strength. Kreider only has 2 even strength points right now. Trocheck only has 10 points. Their 5-on-5 numbers, actual goals are all below 50%. Their expected goals, Zabinajad is at 42.2%, Kreider 43.6%, Trouba 49%, Trocheck 45.3%. It's disgusting, and especially the special teams are far worse, especially the power play, than last season. They were 26.4% last year, third in the entire NHL. This year, they're 21.2%, 11th in the NHL. So I 1000% understand what Drury wants to do. If he sees a hockey trade out there to potentially improve this team, you got to do it. You definitely got to be looking at this point because although, which I'm sure you're going to bring up, they've only been a playoff team for 3 years and they made the Eastern Conference Finals 2 out of those 3 years. It's been kind of ugly the last 2 years when they eventually got eliminated. Against Florida, they just got outclassed. Shesterkin stole a game or two in that series. In 2023, outside of the first 2 games, they got dominated by the Devils. And although they've only been in the playoffs the last 3 years, they kind of came out of nowhere. It's not like it's this actual rebuild where they're ascending. They got Artemi Panarin. They got older guys on their team right now. So it's not like they have this 5, 6, 7 year window at this point. It's really just like 2 to 3 years. They'll still be good with Lafreniere, especially breaking out. Fox and Igor aren't that young, but most of their core is pretty old, so they don't have that much of time. I'm gonna throw it to you. That was a long spiel by me, but yeah, I think that their frustration, the fans' frustration, and Chris Drury's apparently frustrations, I think are pretty valid.
Yeah, so first part of that I'll tackle is I fully agree with you how, is this team a young team? Not really. It depends on where you're looking. If you're looking at the top 6, the forward group, this is a really old team
Mm-hmm.
for the most part. Like
Mm-hmm.
these guys are, and we're seeing it in real time with Kreider and Zibanejad. These guys are quickly aging out of their primes.
Mm-hmm.
Panarin
Mm-hmm.
so far this year has been
Still has been
great,
good, yeah.
but probably pretty soon will also be aging out of his prime. The defense is pretty young, all things considered. Igor should be great for a while. But you're right that it's not a straight upward line. You need to do something. As far as what is that something you can do, we're looking at 2 really different situations here, I think. Because Chris Kreider has been really pretty good for
Mm-hmm.
at least the last 3 or 4 years since he had his true breakout. I mean, he's had that 150 some goal
54
season
goal
in there.
season
Yeah.
where 42 of them were right in front of the net. It's a skill in front of the net, but
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
no.
he's cleared 35 goals each of the last 2 years. So, you can say he's declining. Clearly, the numbers right now show that. The 0 assists is
It's
just
wild.
baffling. That blows my mind.
Yeah,
Um,
not some bullshit secondary assist.
it's crazy. But my point is really that you look at a guy like Chris Kreider, who's been a pretty productive player for a while. And I mean, maybe at this point you're selling low. I understand why you'd want to shake up, but I would feel pretty okay just riding it out and hoping for a rebound with him. Completely different situation then for Jacob Trouba, who, if anyone wasn't following the Rangers so much in the offseason, if it was even possible to get rid of Jacob Trouba, that would have happened in July or
Yeah, he
August.
explored those options.
Yeah, he has that no trade clause and seems very intent on using it to stay in New York. There was allegedly a trade that was already agreed to with Detroit to send him over there in the offseason, but Truba allegedly, we don't know 100% sure here, allegedly
Shifted.
Truba vetoed that
Yeah.
trade that was agreed to by the two teams.
Yeah, apparently he like altered his no trade clause to solely the teams that were like able to trade for him. So they were like, I know this team can't, although I would go to some type of contender, I just don't want to leave point blank period. I will say on that, apparently a major factor in that was his wife was finishing her medical residency in New York. So maybe it's more movable now. Maybe he can go somewhere for 4 months or maybe in the off season. But yeah, continue on that.
I mean, speaking of movable, let's just talk about the contracts themselves because I believe that Chris Kreider at $6.5 million is very movable.
Hmm.
That's that's second line money, and Chris Kreider as a second line player who can score power play goals for you, one of
Big
the
net
best in
front
the league at
presence, yeah.
scoring power play goals, great net front presence. There's value there. Truba at $8 million. I don't think it's even possible to get rid of that without sending draft picks over.
And you'd probably have to retain like 2 to 3 million or
Yeah,
something like that.
and then if you're gonna send like there's no version of a hockey trade for Jacob Trouba. A Jacob Trouba trade is we sent Trouba and a second round pick to the Anaheim Ducks and also retained 2 or 3 mil on it. And at that point, like, okay, cool, he's off your books. What's your plan then to actually improve the team?
Mhm.
You can maybe say, oh, the team will just be improved by not having Trouba there. I don't know. Maybe there's something to that. But if you want to actually like get better, you're giving up assets to get rid of Trouba. Now you don't have a ton of assets to get a guy in. Capo Caco seems like the one actually super tradable asset on this team, but the fact that he's young and affordable makes me think that Drury has no interest in trading him.
Yeah, you probably have to package a decent amount for Jacob Trouba. The only way I could potentially see it work is like if it's another bad deal, like someone floated in my YouTube video, like Justin Hull has another year after this at $3.4 million. Maybe you can do something where you save some money in the next year and a half, and you could just get off Jacob Trouba. Maybe something like that's possible. But yeah, I agree. In terms of the guys that could, in terms of Chris Kreider getting traded, it would have to be a solid hockey trade for another guy making around $6 to $7 million. And you might honestly have to attach a pick just to get a player of Chris Kreider's quality, just because you're clearly, considering this leak got out, that you're at kind of a position just to make any trade. Zibanejad's not movable at this point. He makes like $8.5 million for a couple more seasons after this. Jacob Trouba, I think this offseason it's maybe possible. You could maybe get away with attaching 2 second-round picks. You can call up Mike Rear. He somehow took on Barclay Goodrow for him. But yeah, Ryan Lindgren's not really tradable at $4.5 million. I wouldn't hate if Drury did something, but I also feel like this early in the season, it might kind of be a scare tactic to be like, Chris Kreider's our longest tenured New York Ranger, and he's potentially on the blocks. Like, nobody is safe, point blank, period. But what do you think about that?
I personally think that would be a really weird way to go about trying to motivate your guys, as opposed to like, oh, what a normal hockey team would do is have the coach sit guys down and talk to them, or maybe the coach can make
Scratch
like a
'em.
statement, healthy scratch. No one on this team is safe, no matter how much you're making. To try and get that same point across by having the GM leak trade rumors seems really weird to me. Like, I feel like there has to be something to it, just because like
Mhm.
I don't understand how you would choose to do this thinking like, oh, we're just bluffing because this will motivate Chris Kreider. That doesn't really follow to me.
Yeah, and something really interesting about this Rangers team is everybody talks about how the cap's going up. Teams will have $4 to $5 million next offseason. And while the Rangers technically their cap will rise, if they're going to re-sign Shesterkin, if they're going to re-sign
It's all on
Lafreniere, that's going
Igor.
to go from a guy making 2 million to 7 million. Shesterkin going from making 5.5 to 11.5. So this core is pretty cap sustainable this season, but after it, someone might just have to get traded in terms of like shedding cap space, because they're adding just $10 million alone from internal raises. Keandre Miller's also a restricted free agent. He's probably going to make, even though he has been playing kind of bad, if they want to sign him to some kind of term, he's going to want $5 to $6 million. So this Rangers core probably isn't going to be the same next season for sure. And I wouldn't hate the idea of Drury getting ahead of it now and maybe clearing some money. Still, obviously, he's not going to trade Chris Kreider for like picks and prospects. Like they're all in right now still. But I think potentially trading Chris Kreider, obviously trading Trubus would be harder, but trading Chris Kreider for a guy that only makes $3.54 million the next 2 seasons, and you can get a pick as well that you could flip that for someone at the deadline, so you have 2 players instead of just Chris Kreider right now, who has been struggling so massive, and a guy that's also younger than Chris Kreider. Maybe that could make some sense. But yeah, if I'm a New York, where would you like? Do you think the Rangers are a legit contender right now?
I think the Rangers are a legit contender right now. Only really because I think that the players they have on paper are pretty good, and I trust them to turn it around. Um, I mean, I think you just ride out with Kreider and Zibanejad, and you will see better results. And if, it's February and those results aren't coming and we're having the same conversation, then I'll probably change my mind and say, okay, this team's not a contender. All of their good forwards are aging out of their primes too quickly. They need to bring in some new blood. But like right at this moment, I do believe that they have the names on this roster to turn it around.
Yeah, I'm never gonna like say that they don't have a shot to win in the playoffs just because Shesterkin has been so good in prior years. Like as long as he's in net, they're gonna have a chance. But it has just been so even with their third line, especially Will Cooley breaking out, it has been so concerning, especially at even strength this season. I've referenced it in multiple videos at this point. They're sixth worst in expected goals against per 60 in the entire NHL. There's rebuilding tanking teams that are doing better right now in terms of even strength defense that can win you. Igor can carry you through a couple rounds, a round or two, can beat the Washington Capitals and then maybe like a Carolina Hurricanes. But I think once you go against the Florida Panthers, once you potentially get to a Stanley Cup final, which I know at that point they're basically our true contenders. But in terms of Shesterkin having to play out of his mind for 25, 26 games for an entire Stanley Cup run, if this team's going to continue the way that they're playing at 5-on-5, I'm not sure how sustainable it is. I think I would definitely have them in that second tier. I think it's Edmonton, Dallas, not in any order. Edmonton, Dallas, Florida, Carolina, then probably the Rangers, Winnipeg Jets, Minnesota Wild, Colorado Avalanche, definitely. I think that's kind of where I'd have them. They're definitely in that second tier.
Yeah, I mean that second tier is not a bad place to be though, right? You
Definitely,
got
yeah.
like
You don't
what
have to be in the
Vegas in
first
that
tier.
second
Yeah,
tier,
Vegas as well.
Vancouver, Minnesota. That second tier is a lot of teams that I would call, you know, some degree of contender. I will say the Metro obviously a lot tougher this year.
Yeah.
Washington and New
Washington was
Jersey
a
are both a
freebie.
lot
Yeah,
better than they were
Washington,
last year.
Washington was a fucking free space on the bingo card last year in terms of that. They got lucky.
Yeah,
They played one of the worst playoff teams, but this year's
this
Washington
year,
team
if they
is
if
actually
they
legit.
if they rematch that exact playoff series this year, I don't know for sure I'd pick the Rangers on that.
Yeah, it's going at least to 6. Last time around, it was an absolute. Shesterkin didn't even play like that good in that series, and they still swept them. But if they have to play Washington right now, they're in line to probably it's either gonna be Washington or New Jersey.
I don't love either of those matchups for the Rangers.
Yeah, I'd pick both New Jersey. I don't know. I didn't mention New Jersey. They might be in the third tier of contender. I honestly might have those 4. Then New Jersey, Vegas, Minnesota, Colorado. Then I might go the Rangers. It's like the Winnipeg Jets, who I think are kind of frauds. But that's where I'd have the Rangers. Maybe I'm being blind with my hater glasses, but yeah, we've just seen this the last 3 years, and these guys have only gotten older. Yes, you have had one true breakout in Lafreniere, and I guess Will Cooley as well has been great. But there hasn't been enough to show me that this team is actually going to go on a full deep Stanley Cup run. But do you have anything else on that? We're gonna move on.
No, I'm ready to move on.
The coaching carousel is firing away. Up first, last Tuesday or last Wednesday? I think it was like the day after we shot the pod. But the Bruins fired Jim Montgomery after a 5-1 loss to the Columbus Blue Jackets. They were 8-9-3 when he got fired. Definitely record-wise, it was deserving, but Montgomery had a 120, 41-23 record, which is a 117-point pace. I'll throw it over you first for this. Do you think it was justified? Do you think this is a good move for the Boston Bruins? Did they need to do it? What do you think?
I don't think it was a good move. I think maybe it was a needed move because you need to shake something up. And, in the NHL, firing the coach is a way easier way of shaking things up than trading any core
Mm.
players. Um,
Especially with the way their core was playing, they were gonna
yeah, I
get
mean,
shit for
it's
them.
Pasternak's untouchable because he just signed a huge 8-year extension, and literally everyone else, even like Charlie McAvoy, who's a very good player, everyone else on that team has really
Mm.
underperformed the level that we both know they can play at. Um, I mean, Swayman has been not good. He hasn't, and the defense has not been good in front of him, but he has not been elevating by any stretch.
Korpisalo is playing better at this point, which is
He
concerning.
is, which is crazy. So, I mean, in the big picture, I think Montgomery's a pretty great coach. He did a fantastic job with a Boston team that's been bleeding talent for the last couple
Yeah.
years, and it's only really caught up to them this year, right? I mean, coming into last year, a lot of people I think were saying, I was one of them, but I definitely wasn't the only one. I look at the Boston Bruins roster last summer. The top two centers are who? Charlie Coyle, Pavel
Yeah, last
Zacha.
last year
I'm
looked like
looking at
they're
this
gonna
team
fall off.
like, oh, this team is going to fall off hard
Yeah.
this year. And it didn't happen. Credit to Montgomery, credit to the goalie tandem they had, of course, but that's Montgomery's credit too. That fall off didn't happen. You lose Bergeron, you replace him with very
They didn't
mid-level
even have any money. Yeah,
players.
they didn't even have money to spend last offseason because they went so all in during 2023. They signed like Krejci and Bergeron to these weird like bonus heavy deals. They had like $5 million in dead cap. But yeah, I think I agree with you on that. It's definitely a I don't like the move because I think Montgomery is genuinely a top 10 coach in the NHL. But after what they did this offseason, because again, last offseason it was like the down year. You thought after having 109 points last season, they add Lindholm and Zadorov, which I think we both agree those deals are kind of shit. They were shit in the moment. Even this season, they were kind of overpayments, but still, they added that to that team. And yes, they lost Allmark, but you thought Swayman could provide 55 to 60 games of solid goaltending. So yeah, it definitely stinks. Montgomery obviously picked up and got a job ASAP. We'll talk about that in a second. And Sweeney is definitely scapegoating yet again in this situation, but I don't hate Boston doing this considering just how much pressure there is right now. And there is something to a degree of that energy, that bolt of urgency when you fire a coach that like once you fire the coach again, that's like the last gun in the bullet. After that, either obviously Don Sweeney could get fired, but then someone could potentially get traded outside of David Pastrnak if they continue to play shit like that, as shit as this. They hired Joe Sacco, who I obviously didn't know much about before. He coached the Avalanche like when they were kind of just like bottoming out. Eventually did lead to them getting Nathan McKinnon in his final season. He had a 493 points percentage, but he's basically been in the Boston system since 2014. He was hired as the assistant, became the associate head a couple years ago. It's solid. It's a guy with it's not a complete shakeup, but it's a guy within the system that's going to be the players probably love him considering he's been there for a decade. He's developed basically every player that's homegrown on that team. So I think it's solid, and the results have followed as a result. They really locked in defensively. They're 2-0 with wins over Detroit and Utah by a combined score of 3-1. So it looks like to some degree, long term, maybe a season from now, Joe Sacco is going to get fired because he's just not that good of a coach. But as of right now, I think this might have been the right move for the Boston Bruins to turn it around. What do you think?
Uh, I'm not convinced that Boston's going to be able to turn this around. I mean,
East
you're
is so
talking
wide
about like
open, though.
two
Yeah, no,
games
yeah,
with a
yeah,
combined
play up.
score throughout. They scored 3 goals in 2 games. I mean, I'm not making fun of you. I'm just highlighting that I think the real problem Boston has right now is just they don't have enough NHL players in that forward group.
Yeah,
They just
it's pretty
don't.
ugly.
There's no depth and no top end talent there because I
Outside of
mean
Pasta, yeah.
Brad Marchand, I'm not sure exactly what level of
Going
player he
downhill.
is right now. I don't think he's a top 6 player on a playoff team
I wouldn't
at
go
this
that far, but
moment.
he's probably a second. He's a good second liner. It's looking like the way he's been trending to go from like point per game to 60 and 70 to now where he's at right now.
Yeah, I mean, last year they got by without having a single guy who makes me think, oh, that's a good center. They had none of those last year. They did fine. This year they still have none of those because Lindholm's been pretty poor.
Shit. He's
Which
also been
Lindholm was pretty poor last year after the trade. So
before the trade, after the trade, he stunk last year.
I think this
Straight
is
up.
maybe just like his trajectory. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't think it's like the most awful idea in the world to like elevate from within your own ranks. I just don't think Boston has enough offense. They don't have enough players to get this done.
Yeah, I mean, you go back to, and I hate to harp on like 2015, the draft and all that, but some of the depth that they lost by kind of whiffing on a lot of guys, and Jake DeBrusk most recently left the team. But even since that draft, 2017, I think they got Trent Frederick, 2018, like they haven't been drafting at a high level, and they haven't had a lot of first round picks, but they haven't been able to develop a lot of guys. And even a guy like Fabian Lysell that has been pretty productive at the AHL level is not even playing that good at the AHL right now, hasn't even earned the right to get called up at the NHL level. So they just don't really have anything in terms of immediate young help outside of Matty Poitras. It's just bad. It's bad. I still think they're going to make the playoffs just because, again, that last wild card spot, it's going to come down to like them, Buffalo, New York, Ottawa. Like they're probably going to be the team that ends up making it. And I think they are going to be a decent threat in the playoffs. I wouldn't want to play them just because they are that physical team that can maybe beat the shit out of you and get in your head. But yeah, Boston, it's heading downhill, but I think they'll be decent for the next 4 to 5 years just because they have McAvoy, Swayman, and Pasta. I feel like they've just entered like slightly better Islanders. If that
Uh,
makes sense. They can maybe go on a run, but they're going to
it's tough.
be
I see where you're coming
third
from
Atlantic
there.
or wild card
To
the next
me,
couple of
the
years.
main difference is I at least trust that Ilya Sorokin is really good.
Swayman, yeah, Swayman's
Even if
still
he's not the
TBD.
most consistent guy in the world, Sorokin is usually mostly very good. Swayman has never
No track
really
record, yep.
had to be the number one guy. I mean, I'm not sure there's ever once been a season where Jeremy Swayman led the Bruins in starts.
Last year, he might have had like slightly more. I could be wrong, but yeah, it was like 4 or 5 more
The other guy
starts.
got
It
the
was,
awards, right? So
yeah,
it
in
is what it is
2023, yeah.
there. Um, it's just it's tough. I'm not saying Swayman's a bad goalie or an overrated goalie. I'm just saying I don't think we have the track record to say that Swayman is the kind of goalie that will like keep a mid-level team afloat in the
Mhm.
playoffs. Maybe he can. I'm not convinced about that. We've never seen it from him, and that was when like Boston had better teams than the ones right now. I mean, the Florida series I'm thinking back to ping-ponging back and forth with Swayman and Olmark. Like it's not like Swayman's locking down these jobs
He
long
did ball
term.
out last year in the playoffs. I will defend him on that, but I do agree. We haven't seen him play 55 to 60 games and hold even like a 9-10. And this year he's going to have to battle back to even getting to like a 9-10, 9-11. But
I
yeah.
mean, it's tough. It could work out. I think I'm not going to pick any of those other teams over Boston, but I'll take the field over Boston right now.
That's fair. Yeah, if you combined all four of those, I think that is, but I still think Boston probably has like a 60, 65. But again, if you're Boston, you're not just trying to sneak in as a second wild card at this point, although I do think they'd be decently dangerous. We also got to talk about the ex-Boston coach going over to St. Louis where he previously coached as an assistant. Drew Bannister, after going 30, 19, and 5 at the end of last season, had a rough start to start this year, going 9, 12, and 1. He gets canned on a Sunday morning, kind of out of nowhere. I rolled out of bed and saw that, and I was like, what the hell? But yeah, it makes sense. The Blues, I'll start with this one. The Blues just weren't that good of a team even last year. They ranked 27th in expected goals percentage last year. They just had Binnington and Joel Hofer play out of their minds. They both had a 913 that was just out of control. They were a top 5, arguably top 3 duo in the entire NHL that elevated them, even with that grade of goaltending, because they were so bad on 5-on-5. Special teams are mediocre at best. They were only like a 91-point team, despite having that elite of goaltending. And this year was just more of the same. So I do agree with the Blues to do this. If a coach like Jim Montgomery, like we just talked about before, the track record that he has, you got to do something aggressive like that. If the ownership's willing to spend money, there's a lot of ownerships in the National Hockey League that wouldn't do something like that. Fire a guy after they made him the full-time head coach last offseason. Although it sucks for Drew Bannister, he's going to get paid a shit ton. And although I don't think the Blues, we can talk about it more, I don't think the Blues are any sort of threat in the Western Conference during the next 3 to 5 years under Montgomery. It's definitely an upgrade in terms of coaching.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that I love the ruthlessness from St. Louis. If you see a good coach, you grab a good coach. The fact that you have a coach right now, and he's getting paid whatever he is, and he's still owed that money, that doesn't matter. If you see a coach on the market that you like more than your own, you get that guy, give him the long-term contract. They gave him 5 years,
5 years, yeah.
and that's for the future now. Um, I feel bad for Bannister in the sense that, I have no idea if he's a good coach or a bad coach. I don't think anyone can say.
And I'm
What
not
I
sure he's going to get a second job after this immediately.
what I do feel okay saying is he did not like underperform their talent level, right?
Yeah.
Like he did not take a good roster and get bad performance out of them. He took a really mediocre roster uh where, they won the cup, what's that, 5 years ago now? Lost several significant players in each of the 2 or 3 summers after that. They lost one or
Mhm.
two more significant players. And then by the time you get around to the team last year, it's like this forward group's really not very good.
Outside of
Jordan
their
Kyrou
first
looks
line, yeah.
checked out half the time. Braden Shen's declining very fast. This defense group is a train wreck. Colton Parayko and Torrey Krug, first of all, they can't stay healthy at the same time. I'm
Mm.
not sure I've ever seen the two of them on the ice in the same game, just the way that's been going for them, which is, it's unfortunate. Those injuries are not their fault. And they were, significant injuries. Parayko's been super inconsistent since then. Krug's out for this whole year with a major injury. Justin Falk, not super impressive. Jordan
Nicoletti.
Binnington is inconsistent and not super impressive. He was good last year, kept them afloat last year. Okay, cool. I don't really rate Binnington as an above average goalie.
Yeah, they have a combined 891 now, that goaltending tandem.
Yeah,
That's a stark
Binnington
fall
has a
off.
ceiling. Binnington's one of those goalies with like a really nice ceiling, but a really horrible
Oh,
floor.
definitely.
And it's especially with specifically Jordan Binnington, it's just so obvious how it's like kind of a mental thing, right? Like if he's
He's playing
feeling
good,
it,
he's
he's
saying,
playing
"I'm the
good.
man,
If
I'm the
he's not
man."
feeling it, he's going to be swinging his
Yeah.
stick at guys' shins as he lets in
Yeah.
his 7th goal of the night.
Like Alexander Georgiev the other night. But yeah, for Bannister, well, especially once Robert Thomas broke his ankle, I think it was, and he was out like 4 to 5 weeks, although he came back a little bit early. Any shot of them making the playoffs, it was already non-existent. I had them safely as my 7th or whatever. I had Utah well ahead of them in my preseason predictions because again, they just aren't that good of a roster. And if you're Montgomery, I obviously you take the job that's ahead of you, especially if they're willing to give you $5 million and probably like or 5 years and probably like $5 to $6 million. But I do think he's just gonna be having them at 85 to 90 points the next 5 years. They're not gonna fully rebuild because they have Robert Thomas, they have Jordan Kyrou, they just got Broberg, that's maybe a decent piece. They have some decent prospects in Dvorsky and Snuggerud, but this team you can't win with your best player being Robert Thomas. And then not even having a player that's quite to his Pavel Buchnevich is very good as well. Kyrie is very good as well. But that's the 50th best player, then probably like the 65th, and then like the 77th. Granted, they're all the forwards, and you don't have a single top 50 defenseman. I think you could arguably
I'd agree
say.
with that. Yeah.
Like this team, unless Adam Jiricek turns out to be a stud. Broberg, that was not some fluky start. I think Broberg's actually be solid, but his 9 points in 12 games, he's a legit top pair guy, and they just have all their prospects hit. I don't see this team being remotely close to contending. Maybe Joel Hofer also turns into a stud, and that could happen. But the most realistic outcome for this team is to just bounce back and forth between selecting like 7th and 13th overall the next 5 years.
I don't agree about the 5-year outlook. I think that outlook makes sense for the rest of this year and probably next year. This move inspired. It's not so much that I believe in the prospect pool in St. Louis, although I do believe in it to an extent. And, at least Kyrou and Thomas are reasonably pretty young. Binnington's young, at least. This kind of all-in, very aggressive coaching hire from St. Louis does give me hope that they're going to be all in and aggressive in player movement. I can kind of see them. I mean, they have the kind of guys you could sort of have like a Vegas in type off season where like, oh, we have a bunch of names and kind of expensive contracts. It seems stuck, maybe. It's not actually that stuck if you're a creative GM and you can send off like $30 million worth of pretty decent players for pennies on the dollar and then find some other way to replace them in. I'm not saying I'm guaranteeing that's going to happen. I'm saying I think St. Louis at least has the ambition to try that as an ownership group. I think that this hire is a sign of like we see the team's direction is not great. Even though there's nothing specific so terrible with the coaching situation, the team's direction right now is not great, and we can do things to shake up that direction. And I'm really interested to see now this summer if they try really shaking things up.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the argument would be that the Blues like missed the playoffs one of the years in the 2010s, kind of had to do a little bit of like a reassessment. But again, I would push back on that. That Pietrangelo was a consensus top 10 defenseman. Jiricek was the second best goal scorer in the entire NHL for like a 4-year stretch, only behind Ovechkin. I just don't see. I don't think that they have the assets to potentially go off and pull off like a Jack Eichel kind of move like Vegas, and none of their prospects seem like they could be stars. But yeah, I respect Jim Montgomery for getting the bag. Do you have a
Real
counterpoint
quick
to that?
though, in there, Tage Thompson was not the kind of prospect to get a star in when they traded him for Ryan O'Reilly.
I guess that, yeah, I guess that's fair, but again, they're not close to potentially doing. They're not a Ryan O'Reilly level player like when he was 2019. From seriously, it's just so tough. The West is just such a war that I just don't see them. And you still have teams like the Anaheim Ducks, San Jose Sharks, Utah Hockey Club that are on the rise. And right now, there's like 8 legit playoff teams. St. Louis just seems in the middle. They're not as bad of a situation as my New York Islanders, but not to reuse this again like I did with Boston, but I feel like they're a Western Conference New York Islanders with a slightly better prospect pool, if that makes sense. They're not as boring, but they don't have as good of goaltending. But yeah, I just think that they're kind of stuck. Maybe St. Louis Blues fans, you should feel good that I'm this low on your team. But yeah, it's definitely unfortunate right now. What coach do you think is next? If you had to guess, we're gonna run through the names.
I mean, I feel like the answer should be Mike Sullivan until it's Mike Sullivan, right?
Yeah.
And then somehow it's never Mike Sullivan.
I think he's almost so far, like they're 7-12 and like it's been so bad that what can lead to a firing for him, if that makes sense. If it's been this bad, I feel like he's safe for the rest of the year. I think he is. As I say that, he's definitely going to get fired like Thanksgiving Day.
Andrew Burnett maybe could be hot seat.
Yeah, they lost last night.
This is only
to
his
the Devils.
second year there, right?
Yeah, but
I can see him on the hot seat because they really tried to go all in this summer.
I still think Lalonde's probably the pick right now. My Islanders are like, as I tweeted out, single-handedly keeping him afloat because they're 3-0 against the New York Islanders. I feel like that's the one where this is his third for sure. Maybe even his 4th season in Detroit. I could be wrong in that. I think it's 3rd, actually. But, like, he's the guy that's been there. Andre Tourney as well, although they maybe didn't have as high as expectations in Utah. He's been there. This is his 4th season. Like, that is fully, like, if they miss the playoffs, he probably, unless they barely miss the playoffs, but I don't think that's going to happen. He's probably, if I had to bet on someone to just get fired point blank period, it would probably be Tourney, just because it's his 4th season. Maybe not first, because like that'd be a tough look for Utah to fire their head coach mid-season in their first season.
I think that would be a very wait until the summer move.
Yeah,
is how I see that.
They should have. They should have. Utah would have been perfect for like a Jim Montgomery, fire Tourney, bring him in, because that also would have just further invigorated the fan base. I don't know if I've used that word correctly. Reinvigorated. They're already pretty vigored. But yeah, Tourney, I think he's probably a can. Luke Richardson's a decent pick just because Bedard's not progressing like we thought and no one on their team is playing good. I feel like that's a decent shout. And then lastly, I put Patrick Waugh, but I can't see Lou doing like another mid-season. That would be such an indictment on Lou. That like
he could go the
3 coaches
what
within 12
year
months.
Was it that Lou fired
Became
the coach
that,
and installed himself?
Yes, actually, now I say that, I want Lou. I think like the last like bullet in his chamber, just being like, "I'm taking over as head coach." That would be hilarious.
He did
I would
that
love that.
in whatever year it was,
Jersey,
and made a playoff run with that.
Yes, that is sick. I want Lou Lamoriello. Like it is full fucking suit. Like. I'm down. I'm down with that. I want Lou Lamoriello. I am declaring that martial law for the New York Islanders. Lou Lamoriello takes over as head coach. He's just the only coach. They fire all the assistants. It's just Lou Lamoriello.
Lou City.
Yeah, I would love that. But moving on, we got another guy that we talked about last week. David Jiricek, a lot of talks last week about him and Columbus having this rift. Waddell basically confirmed it. They sent him down to the AHL last Thursday, and now apparently he might get traded. By the time that this comes out, he potentially could be on a different team. So this could age pretty bad. If you're listening to this, he probably didn't get traded. But yeah, Frank Saravalli said on Monday that they're in the late stage of fielding offers, and it's not an if, it's a when. Right now, in terms of him getting traded, it's basically a sure thing. He said that they have 5 to 6 concrete offers, but Philly, Pitt, and Minnesota are the front runners, but also apparently the Sharks and the Sabres are offering. Out of these 5 teams, where do you think is best for Jiricek, and what do you think the return-ish will be?
So, I mean, first of all, shout out to Jiricek, who I said, last week, 2 weeks ago, he should not be sent down. They should just play the guy in Columbus. I stand by that. Scored an overtime winning goal in Cleveland Saturday night. It was fun to see. He's I guess we're not allowed to be impressed by his offense because he needs to work on his defensive game or whatever. Even though his defensive numbers are just as mediocre as Severson's over there. The point is, he's an actually very good player, I think. Very bright future there. I'm looking at this list here of who could be in on him. I think that Philly makes the most sense as a landing spot.
Definitely.
Because Philly's in like the early mid stage of rebuilding, and they definitely need more defense. The forwards, they have relatively more. They need everything, but I would say they're in a position where the forwards, they're relatively more covered.
Mm-hmm.
Same goes for San Jose, a team in the early mid stages of rebuilding where I feel really good about their forward young prospect group, rookie group. I don't feel so great about their defense.
Yeah, it's Sam Dickinson and then like a whole lot of nothing.
Yeah, I mean, San Jose is probably a spot where he could be like playing second pair minutes tomorrow night if he goes there. Like there's no one to block him. There's no reason why you shouldn't play him. And I do feel like that's best for his development right now. Just like give him the NHL reps, let him learn from his mistakes and work through it. Like, you can't learn from your mistakes if you're playing 9 minutes a night and then you're in the press box the next 4 days. You know, San Jose Sharks, if you can guarantee the guy 15 minutes a night and he's playing pretty much every game, he'll make some mistakes and then work through them because like that's how player development works, especially on the defensive end.
Yeah, I think Philly, it scares me a little bit just because Tortorella's there. You could potentially break a guy like David Jiricek. But I do agree in terms of a team needing a high-end defenseman prospect for their rebuild. Right now, it probably would be Philly. Oliver Bonk's a solid offensive guy. I'd rather have Jiricek. The Sharks definitely make a lot of sense just because they're still kind of bare bones. The Sabres do make some sense just because he's a righty. I think that could work. They have so many lefties in power, Byram, Samuelson, and Dahlin. But yeah, the Sabres are probably charging for a playoff spot. I don't know for his development. That's maybe best. Minnesota's, I like it in terms of Minnesota, just like stacking young talent. They have plenty, but like they're going to be a playoff team. They don't have that good of a bottom pair right now, but are you going to throw Jiricek in a sizable role? And like, if he doesn't play that good, you are going to have to bench him and then he could potentially get pissed off. So I don't know if I love Minnesota there. Yeah, I think the Sharks is just such an obvious answer because they're trending in the right direction in terms of everything. I'm surprised Chicago hasn't made a push at all for him. Get one of your old-ass defenders out of there and make a room for David Jiricek. In terms of what he'd get back, I'm starting to get less and less feeling that he's going to get a first-round pick. I think he's going to get like a second and an B-level prospect, maybe even B-.
Yeah, I don't see any version of this where Columbus
it's been such
gets
a public
back
disaster.
The value that
they
think they should get based on his draft slot.
Yeah, just because it's been so public. He's not that old. He's about to be 21 in like a couple weeks. But yeah, it got public and he hasn't shown enough at the NHL level to get a serious return. I would rather have I'd rather have Jiricek over like the 21st overall pick in this year's draft. Don't get me wrong. But in terms of just the overall leverage, it's probably not going to be that much in terms of what Jiricek gets. Next up, Alexander Ovechkin. After it looked like he was an all but sure thing to get the goal record this season, he unfortunately got hurt. He's week to week right now. It came out week to week. It was weird. Like initially you thought like it was maybe going to be like a week or two. Then it turns out that he's out 4 to 6 weeks. He was playing great, obviously 15 goals, 10 assists, 25 points in 18 games. Still only needs 27, which is possible. If he plays, I think he needs like 27 in his final 52 if he comes back after only missing like 15 games. So, what's your thoughts on the Ovechkin injury, and will it at all? Are the Caps now at danger of missing the playoffs, or has their start been good enough to kind of like lock it up?
The Caps are not at danger of missing the playoffs. That team is playing pretty well overall. It's not like Ovechkin's the only one carrying them. I mean, I don't know exactly how Dylan Strome is having the season he's having.
He's a
I can't
stud. He's a
figure it
stud.
out, but he's doing it. Connor McMichael been a great breakout. Like they have talent outside of Ovechkin. I mean, they brought in Pierre-Luc Dubois. Pierre-Luc Dubois has done very little for that team,
And they're
but it
still,
hasn't really
yeah.
hurt them at all. And that's at least one more guy who you can throw minutes to and hope things can work out. They have some depth there. Mangiapane is over there now. Some more depth in on scoring wings. You can. They're not the most amazing team in the world, but they do have enough talent. What's going to happen is they're going to take a small step back, which they would have taken that small step back anyway,
Yeah, they're
I
due for
think.
some
And
regression.
people will say that, oh, that step back is because Ovechkin's out. Instead of
They're not a
partly
legit
because Ovechkin's out,
109-point team,
partly
yeah.
because just normal regression. Either way, I feel pretty good about them being in a playoff spot.
Yeah, I think it definitely hurts their playoff chances by like maybe goes from 69% chance down to like 61. But I think that they're still probably going to make it just because, as we were talking about before, I think Boston's eventually going to get a spot. But in terms of like the Islanders, Senators, or Sabres potentially passing them, there's still a lot of like work that those teams have to do. The one thing that maybe is a little bit concerning in terms of missing Ovechkin is the Ovi, Strome, and Protas line was outscoring opponents 16-5. So although their underlying results were also great, they were playing superb, almost winning them some games in certain cases. So that's going to definitely come back to down to earth, that top line, or I guess it might honestly be the second line now. That's going to come back down to earth. I think they're going to lose some games. Still would safely pick them to make the playoffs, but it might be them battling. I think they're safely going to be a wild card team now behind the Devils, Rangers, and Canes, even though I shout on the Rangers a decent amount. But they're probably going to be a wild card one team, but they have the inside track on the wild card one. It's not fully a Tampa Bay last year. By like December, they were basically locked into wild card one. But yeah, this good of a start, and considering basically everything has clicked for them, it's not like the forward core has solely been carrying them, that now losing Ovechkin is such a big deal. As you mentioned, the defense core is playing great. Logan Thompson's been fantastic, where I'm not massively concerned.
Yeah, they're pretty well rounded. I wouldn't even say that they're definitely falling below the Rangers or the Devils. I mean, the Capitals were the first team in the Metro to have a big major injury. They probably won't be the last. I mean,
That's fair. Let's hope not.
historically, you never hope for or want injuries. I'm just saying, like, for example, historically, the Devils, between Dougie Hamilton, Jack Hughes, you've got some reasonably injury-prone guys on that team.
Yeah. Let's hope nothing like that happens. But yeah, there's definitely been some injuries on those teams, and my New York Islanders are already dealing with the injuries. So by your logic,
it's not like Washington's the only team that's going to take a knock from injuries. So I don't think this is like such a big deal as if he's the only reason they're in the race.
Yeah, he was playing fantastic, but also a lot of players were. So I think they're going to be fine. Another interesting bit of news. JT Miller is taking some type of mental health break, taking a step back from the Vancouver Canucks for at least the 6 games. I just want to talk about it. I think it's a good thing overall. Obviously not a good thing that he's going through it, but the overall reaction I've seen to this has been pretty positive. People finally prioritizing mental health and the fans being understandable. And Vancouver is actually doing pretty good this season. Maybe there'd be a different reaction if they were out of a playoff spot, if like this Mika Zibanejad took a mental health break right now. But yeah, I just wanted to overall talk about it because I think 10 years ago, if someone tried to do this, they would get just absolutely shat on online. And if they saw them in person, it could get like ugly. Like it's just good to see how far men's mental health has come in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, I want to bring this up too because you're running the charity
November,
donation drive for it.
Linktree, go check it out.
Supporting men's mental health, which is an important cause, and it's so cool that you're doing that. So I want to shout out you for what you're doing before diving
it's
into
not.
this. For
I'll
real.
take the compliment.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's really cool that like a player of JT Miller's caliber is able to do this, because you're right, that just would not have been the case years ago. He would either be suffering in silence or like, okay, team, doctors, coach, can we like lie and pretend that it's like a lower body
Yeah.
injury to keep me out so we don't have to deal with the scrutiny over it? And that's just not the case anymore. And whatever he's going through, I hope this is working out for him. We're seeing it more and more with quite a few guys in the NHL, even more than other sports, I've noticed, right?
Mhm.
Several guys in the NHL in recent years. Spencer Knight took a prolonged break
Yeah.
for OCD, I believe he said it was, after the fact. I mean, these guys are going through some stuff, and it's really cool that they're able to get the help and the team support them and the fans mostly support them.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Especially not saying Vancouver's like the most hostile overall fan base, but
They
even
can be
yeah, but I'm
sometimes.
saying it's good to see that they're all like take as much time. Well, not like as much if we miss the entire season, they might switch up, but like take a couple weeks. We should be able to stay afloat without you. Get 100% because again, for Vancouver's sake, it's better that he takes these next 6 to 10 games off instead of just prolonging it throughout the regular season and then going into the playoffs just playing overall worse, because your mental health, especially when it comes to a high pressure sport like hockey, can sometimes be more detrimental to your game than just like a minor physical injury for sure.
Yeah, and even just as a comparison, like we saw Elias Pettersson last year for Vancouver, right? He spent the entire regular season kind of sort of playing through an
Yeah,
injury,
it just
and
kept
it
on,
ended
kept
up
on getting
really
worse,
coming
kept on
back to
getting worse.
bite him in the
Yeah.
playoffs. So I would not want to see that same thing happen to JT Miller, where he's fighting through this all season and it
Mhm.
comes back to bite him in the playoffs.
Yeah, so overall, we just want to talk about that. Get as much help as you can when dealing with this. This is serious stuff, and it's good to see JT Miller. Hopefully, it's not as serious as we're maybe portraying it. Hopefully, it's just a little bit of burnout. But whatever it is, hoping for a full recovery in terms of that. We're gonna go through your follower takes now. We're gonna go through some of these and say whether or not we agree or disagree. Follow my Instagram and Beyond Hockey. Follow In the Box Pod, I believe, is the Instagram handle if you want to be involved in this. But yeah, up first from Ryan Bablitz. Bouchard should not make Team Canada 4 nations. He's been a very controversial player of late. 3, 2, 1.
I disagree.
Disagree.
No, I mean, controversial for what? Because he's like a little bit
He
off of
sometimes
his
goes
normal
lazy.
paces.
No, he's
because he's
there's
too
yeah.
offensive. Like,
I'll push back. I understand considering what the clips that you've seen of Evan Bouchard not getting back on defense, not giving a shit at times, lazy turnovers. There has been a couple cases of that, and that's obviously going to spread like wildfire, especially when you're picking for a team like Canada that is still so prestigious. But I think that a lot of fans that don't watch Oilers games on the regular are just seeing that. This kid is just still just such a special offensive talent. And I'm not saying Canada needs all the most offensive talent, especially on the right side, considering they have Kemba Carr. But I still think that he's better than what the other options are. Dougie Hamilton's horrible defensively. You want to talk about defensive impacts, defensive lapses. Dougie Hamilton's pretty bad defensively. I'd rather have him than Alex Pietrangelo at this point. I know Pietrangelo has the winning pedigree that maybe some people value. Canada has enough winning pedigree and enough leaders in that locker room that he's not going to make the difference. I think on that right side, maybe if he was a lefty, I could see you, and even Noah Dobson hasn't been that good this year on the right side. If he was a lefty, I could see an argument that Morrissey's better, Mackenzie Weegar's better, Shea Theodore's better. I still don't think that they're better, but maybe more suited for an overall Team Canada. But I think on that right side, you got to go with Evan Bouchard.
yeah, I mean, any time that you have a defenseman who spends a lot of time handling the puck, a lot of time
His goal
trying to
against
run an
Ottawa.
offense, you are going to find some lowlights of turnovers or being slow hustling back. I promise you, if I ran through every single Nashville Predators game from the last year, I could cut up 3 minutes of Roman Yossi making turnovers that don't look great or not hustling back 100% on defense. No one in their right mind would say that Roman Yossi is an all offense player. He's like a mostly offense player, but he's manages the whole ice, right?
If he
no one
wanted
on
to, he could
earth
even be better defensively if he sacrificed some of his offense too.
he probably could be. I mean, no one on earth is saying that like Roman Yossi is one dimensional because of that. And I don't think Beauchard is one dimensional at all. I think he's stronger offensively than defensively, sure. And maybe it's more so Matthias Ekholm kind of
Yeah, he's not
peppering
his
over
underlying numbers
his
are insane defensively. I think some of that, a decent amount of that has to do with that comb,
probably,
but
but
he's not
I don't
this
think he's
disaster
like a
defensively.
100% all offense,
Mhm.
0% defense guy. I think he's just like a very good player who mostly puts his attention, his focus on the offensive end, who at least like can participate defensively. I mean, it's not like he's the worst defensive D man in the league, not by a long shot.
Yeah, and again, I understand the clips of him not giving a crap, and I'm not trying to justify it, but there's a difference between a regular season game and Four Nations face-offs. Like, I think Evan Bouchard's going to be giving his 100%. And you could say that maybe you don't want him on your NHL team because sometimes he doesn't give 100%. But spoiler it is, as you mentioned before, sometimes in the regular season, especially early on in the regular season, when you're on a contender like Edmonton, players do take plays off that hopefully, I'd imagine, would not be happening in Four Nations face-off.
He played 100 games last year,
Yeah,
right?
that's
I
what I
mean,
think, yeah.
he was in a Stanley Cup Finals run. He looked pretty engaged to me in those playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
I did not see any Evan Bouchard taking plays off in those playoff series last year.
Yeah, and also he'll have somewhat of a different role on this team compared to Edmonton, where he has to be that star right-handed defense because they have nothing right-handed
He
elsewhere.
has to be the main puck mover for Edmonton. Yeah, on Team
Yeah,
Canada, he's a third
and
pair guy,
yeah,
probably.
yeah, they have Kel McCarr. You don't have to be. You have to be more responsible both ways. So I think Evan Bouchard should be on the team. Would I be like appalled if he misses it? No, I could see the old heads doing that. But right now, I still think that he should, even though maybe he has had a little bit of a lackluster start last year, just so proved that he's the second best righty from Canada. That maybe he's the second best right now or third best right now, but he's definitely not the fourth or the fifth where he completely misses the team.
If he does miss, I think it'll be
For
because of
Hamilton or
Pietrangelo.
yeah.
And I think if that happens, I'll agree with you that it's not the most egregious
Yeah,
thing in the
okay, that's
world,
fine.
but it'll make me kind
I
of roll my
yeah,
eyes and be like,
old
you know,
heads.
these are old heads, right? They value like the fact that he
Mhm.
played on winning teams 5 years ago and not so much like Pietrangelo last year and this year has not been a great player. He hasn't been a bad player or anything. But you know, especially in the era of having Theodore and Hannafin over there, I don't know who's watching Vegas games and thinking Pietrangelo's really standing out these days.
Yeah, yeah. I literally put Petrangelo having like higher odds on my Instagram. Like it was like 95 for 92% Petrangelo, like 82% Bouchard just because he has that experience. But moving on from Nathan Talion 9, he says McKinnon finishes with 100 assists. Obviously, we had two 100 assist guys last year. I believe McKinnon had 89 last year, but he had 51 goals. Yeah, 140 points total. 3, 2, 1.
Disagree.
Agree. I wanna see it happen. I think it'd be an awesome thing. And also, I just hate how like last year Kucherov's entire like. Obviously, he was great overall, but they kept on harping on that 100 assist, why he should win the Hart. So I kind of want McKinnon to hit it the following season after winning the Hart. But yeah, McKinnon right now, what is you're pulling up the stats right now? He's on pace for it. He has like last time I checked, 28 assists in 21 games, which is like 105, 109 point pace. And yeah, I think this season after getting his Hart Trophy, he's maybe trying to feed his boy Rantanen a little bit more, get him some goals in terms of Rantanen getting that contract extension. It's obviously going to come down to if he's healthy. If he misses like any games, I'd probably say that he's not going to hit it. But yeah, right now he's well on pace. He's always been more of a passer. Last year was a little bit of an elevated. What was his career high if you have it pulled up? What was his career on goals
His
before
career
that?
high in goals before last year
Like
was
43?
42 the year before. He hit 41 in
Yeah.
2019. He never hit 70 assists before last year.
That's a little bit concerning. Okay, yeah, you might have a point. Why do you
Yeah,
think it's
so
not-
why I want to dive in here is because McKinnon's stat line right now of 7 goals, 28 assists is pretty mind-blowing on how heavy that slant is. This right
You
now
said
is
McDavid can do it. I can do it too.
this is McKinnon's career high in assists per game per minute. At the same time, it's his career low in goals per games per minute since 2017, before his breakout year.
That's fair. That's fair.
So what does that tell me? It tells me he's passing the puck a lot more. He's shooting it a lot less. Does that like matter or mean anything? I kind of feel like it does, only because Colorado is not playing so amazing. I think there's a pretty clear link between like, maybe if Nate was shooting the puck more, scoring more, being a little more selfish, we would be winning more games. We would have a better seed. So I do think as the season
Yeah.
goes on, he's going to be shooting more, passing less.
What would you put the line at right now?
Line for
95,
assists?
96, or are you saying like 89 again?
89, 90.
Really?
89 and a
I might
half
have-
feels like a
wanna
good
bet
line
like
to
five,
me.
$5 on that over.
Yeah, I'll take that.
All right, first podcast bet. I'm definitely hammering it over at 8900. Yeah, I think logically in my head, I know that's probably not gonna happen, but I'm saying yes. I got to take some type of stand, and I think he's well on pace right now. And again, Colorado isn't playing that good, but I don't think it's because Nathan McKinnon's not shooting that much. I think he's playing great. He still has 7 goals in 21 games, still on pace for 30-ish goals. But yeah, we'll move on there. This is an interesting one from Sam with 2 S's. Bennett, one of Quinn Hughes, Cale Makar, or Adam Fox, or into Adam Fox, win 4 of the next 5 Norrises. So not one of them wins 4 out of the next 5. Between the 3 of them, I'm going to assume it's including this season because the 3 of them are probably like minus 350 to win the Norris, one of them. So yeah, one of the 3 wins. The 3 just win. I keep on messing this up. The 3 of them, between the 3 of them, they win 4 out of the next 5 Norrises. What do you think, Matthew?
Strong disagree here.
I didn't do the 3, 2, 1. I agree on this. I'm not going to lie.
Boo.
I
think they're just, we'll get into it.
I'll go. You want me to go? Okay.
I'll go first, and then you provide my facts. I see you already have like the history of the Norris pulled up, but all right, they're just head and shoulders above. Like obviously injuries can happen, but if I'm choosing between the 3 of them right now, Quinn Hughes and Cale Makar are clearly the 2 favorites, and Adam Fox probably would be my 3rd or 4th pick right now. The idea of I agree, Miro Heiskanen and Rasmus Dahlin aren't like that far below them. But I just think these guys are going to consistently trade off between Quinn Hughes and Cale Makar. 90-ish. Makar has 100-point potential every single season. Adam Fox, just reliable 2-way game, around point per game. I got 1 year of margin of error in this. Maybe Landon DuPont comes in as a stud right out of the gate, but I think 3 out of 5 would be a lock. I'd say 4 out of 5 is very possible. But yeah, hit me with it.
I mean, what I'm going to hit you with is just the way that the Norris works tends to be this like career achievement. He's due. He deserves
recently,
it now.
yes.
The last 9 Norris trophies have gone to 9 different players. I don't think anyone can really tell you with a straight face that like each of those 9 years, a completely different player deserved to win it. It's just the nature of that award is like, half the time there's 3 or 4 really good candidates, and the way the voter logic works is, okay, well, who's the best guy who hasn't won yet?
That's fair. But even the last 4 Norrises, these guys have won 3 of them at such a young age. I get what you're saying. From 2016 to 2020, for the most part, they were just giving guys that was 29, 30 years old at like the peak or kind of towards the end of their peak, they're Norris due. But when you have 3 guys that are 24, 25, and 26 and have won 3 out of the last 4, and there's such a voting bias for Cale Makar too, baked into this. He finished as a 3rd in 2023 despite missing 22 games. That is still one of the biggest injustices, even though he was fantastic that season. Him being a finalist, like they loved last year, he probably shouldn't have been the finalist. But they love Cale Makar. They love Quinn Hughes. Quinn Hughes is kind of the golden boy right now, and rightfully so. And Adam Fox is just kind of a shoo-in to play. He's not as hurt as maybe, say, a Cale Makar. Injuries could go south for Cale Makar, where he misses 10 to 15 games a season. But yeah, I think I would bet on Dahlin or Heiskanen slipping in one, but that sounded weird. But who else would win some? I guess Evan Bouchard could maybe go nuclear, but as we were talking about before, there kind of is this bias against Bouchard because he plays with Draisaitl and McDavid in the Clips. Who would win? Do you think they're going to win 3 out of the next 5? Would you bet on that?
No.
24, 25, 26 years old.
I mean,
3 out of the next 5 is correct. We might have to make another bet 5 years from now if we're still in the podcast.
Cale Makar has really struggled to stay healthy long enough to put together an award-winning season, right?
fair.
It's if you asked like 4 years ago how many Norris trophies you expect Makar to win in the next 5 years, you would have said more than one, I bet, looking at his talent level and what he's done. And I don't think he's going to end up with more than one.
Yeah.
Maybe this year he possibly has this huge, but even this year with his crazy offensive numbers, I don't see it happening, and he's going to end up with 1 in 5 years.
But Quinn Hughes is the favorite right now.
Quinn Hughes
Our
is the
Quinn
favorite.
One of the guys there. I think this year, it's like nearing a lock again. I said at the top of this, but I think it's nearing a lock that one of them wins this season. I think we can. So basically, we're asking for 3 out of 4, and they have won 3 out of the last 4.
But that doesn't mean they're going to win 3 out of the next 4.
I'm not saying that it's like 70% likely that this happens. I'm saying I'd go with it. I'm being an optimist with some of these guys. I would love for a Heiskanen to finally put together a full, like, I mean, he did in 2023, but like an insane, like 85-point season. But I think, especially if we're talking about the way that these voters vote in terms of offensive high outputs, unless the Sabres really pop and Dahlin goes for 80, 85 points, 90 points, I don't really see people taking it from them at this point. I think there's such a clear top 3 in the NHL. McAvoy's never going to sniff one. Roman Josi at this point looks like Nashville's never going to put together a kind of season where he can win it. So yeah, I'd go with yes, but we're gonna move on. This comes from Canty02. Kane gets moved before the deadline. 3, 2, 1. Agree.
Agree, I guess. Like why?
You got to include Showtime whenever you can fit Showtime in. Yeah, I think Detroit would be stupid if they're out of the playoffs race, like we think that they are, like they are right now, to not move Patrick Kane, who doesn't have a long-term future with the team.
No, I'm just kind of confused. Like, why would someone want Patrick? The Rangers rented him at the deadline 2 years ago. That was a total disaster. He's 2 years older now. I understand last year in Detroit, he was very good. This year in Detroit, he's been just okay at 10 points in 20 games. You know, he's fine. He doesn't play defense, so that's a problem. Like, he simply does not play defense. So he's, you know, you can't just like pop him on your third line and be happy with 40 or 50 points because he does not play defense. He's getting older every year. You can claim you're bringing him in for leadership, but like no one on earth actually thinks Patrick Kane was a leader in that Chicago dynasty.
Yeah, compared
Clearly,
to Keith,
his
Seabrook,
leadership
and Taves.
didn't help the Rangers when they got reverse swept by the Devils in the playoffs.
They made it to 7.
They did, but just
they
like
won game 6.
Okay.
gotta give him respect.
Fact check me there.
Or maybe game
No.
5. I don't know.
You get what I'm saying, though. Like,
Yeah.
that team was mentally soft and they crumbled in a rivalry playoff series that they probably should have won. If that team was trying to bring in Patrick Kane for the leadership, I can't think of like worse leadership done than blowing a 2-0 lead to your biggest rival in the playoffs in the first round.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, I agree. And that's where we're going to end the podcast with you going in on Patrick Kane. Absolutely cook this guy. But yeah, thank you for watching. We'll be back next week, hopefully on Tuesday, get back to our normal posting schedule. Let us know on the comment sections of all these things, how you think this is going, what kind of changes we could make to deliver an overall better product for you.
Do you want to see other Matt? Let us know.
Get him out of here. You want to see another Matt instead of me, too? We can do a Mattception. But let me know in the comments, what do you think about all this? I'll be seeing the next one. Peace.